Greetings! It is I, Tantus Narvan Dracovin, Lord Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on D20 Modern, the modern take on the 3rd edition of Dungeons & Dragons. So when we last left off, I'm talking about game mastering a little bit. Let's talk cheating, first off today. So the thing is, you as a dungeon master might find there's a reason to cheat. The thing is, with the turn of a die roll, you could easily have, in the single turn, your entire party of players be wiped out. They could all get killed. A single die roll can do that. Or just a string of bad luck. If there's some kind of, basically, something going on that could kill everybody and they all fail to it, they all die. It's as simple as that. And an ending like that is basically the end of the adventure, the end of your players. And it has this kind of disenfranchising feeling to people. That they're like, geez, we failed horribly. It can occur. Now, the thing is, you might be tempted, of course, to cheat to help things out. To prevent things from going. Prevent these bad things from happening to these players. To keep the game going in a way. You want to keep players happy. You want to keep them engaged. You don't want them to be necessarily disenfranchised with what's going on. There are two issues when we talk about cheating. First off is, do you cheat? Should you? Now this is an interesting discussion because if you would be cheating, it'd be to save players. The thing is, players will face circumstances where they might meet death in the head of battle. Or meet death if they do something stupid. In those cases, I would not cheat. If they're doing something really stupid and getting themselves killed, But if there's a fickle fate, if it's a single die roll, which is just an innocuous die roll, that shouldn't lead to their death, and it does, you might want to cheat things at that point in time. Basically, cheat fate just a little bit to keep your players safe. Basically, that if your players do, accidents can occur. You don't want to have it, just destroy your characters. That it's something that would be, how did that happen? God. It's a terrible feeling for your character to die in the dumbest of ways that wasn't even your fault. The thing is, you're gonna probably feel like you want to follow the rules, just like the players. You really do. If you're gonna keep to that, you have to have the die land where they roll, which can mean a lot of things. It could mean that that villain that you've been hyping up and you were hoping to have be a reoccurring villain could die in the first encounter. Of course, it could also mean that total party wipe I was talking about could occur for your players. If you're going to remain in the honesty of it, then you're going to have to live with whatever happens. That's the thing about it. You're going to have to rely on the die. Here we come up with the other issue, though, is if the players find out you've cheated. That can be a big issue. That they figured out that I did something to save one of them. You don't want them figuring that out. You don't want them knowing about that, because then it removes an element of that danger. They're going to act differently. Even if it's not consciously, they're going to start subconsciously acting differently because they know they don't face that same level of danger that might exist out there. That they know that death isn't something that can strike them. And if you want to try to correct that and basically add death back in as a threat, then someone that encounters that then and was expecting to be saved might be disenfranchised. They might feel like, what's going on? Why am I being picked on? So you can see there's this balancing act against using it. The use of it is to keep the story going, to keep the role-playing going, to keep things going that you don't have to worry about things with relating to rules. So there's a good advantage of using it. But on the other hand, you're not sticking with the rules. And really, if your players find out about you doing it, even certain amounts, it changes the way they think. The thing is, you are the arbiter of the rules. You are the master of them. You create them. You create the world. So the fact is, you don't technically cheat. You don't. It's important to note about this. So we call it cheating because it sort of feels like you are. You're lying about the dice rolls. But it's your world. Your rules. Your everything. You can do whatever you want with it. You don't even have to roll a die, technically. That's how you have to think about it a little bit, too. It's just that normally you try to follow the same rules as those players, as I said. let's talk about ending your sessions. It's important, and this is very important. You don't end a session in the middle of an encounter. If you do that, it's terrible. First off, you're leaving everybody hanging for things. They expect it. They expect to remember what was going on. You have to keep track of initiative and all your notes about it. You're leaving things hanging in such a way that it just feels terrible. There's no resolution to it. There could be an exception to this, and this is if you create some kind of cliffhanger. Something suddenly changes in the course of this battle. A new enemy shows up. Something occurs that would alter things drastically. But yeah, you could end with that. It makes people a little more excited to look forward to the next time, to be like, oh, what's going to happen? This suddenly occurred and changed everything about this encounter that we were having. That's a good way of doing that, but you're building that into the story a little bit then. You're building a cliffhanger in. You're using it as a process that, maybe you wanted to end that session there, or maybe you were planning for that cliffhanger all along and it was just an opportunity to throw it in there. Regardless, it's a good way of keeping an encounter, sort of cutting it off in the middle a little bit. But again, you still face those problems of keeping track of all those numbers and stuff, and where everybody was, and all that other stuff. And it might be good to sort of reset things to a new encounter when you start it. It's a balancing act of more information. Similar to what we were talking about before. Balancing acts. It's a lot of what it is for you as the game master. Balancing things. Now, I want to finish up this sort of talk we've been having today with checklist. This is an important checklist. This is the checklist of your adventure. Okay, what does this mean? These are the important things that you're going to have to basically take care of in the course of your adventure that you're running. Not the adventure directly, just the session itself is what I'm really talking about. First off, you need an appropriate location. You need a place with room for people, some kind of flat surface, places that they can put books, roll die, places that you can have any kind of maps if you have them, places that they can keep notes, places you can keep all the books and stuff. So it should be comfortable too, and have room for everyone that's going to be there. So you can see how you need an appropriate location with an appropriate setup for people. You want to make them feel comfortable, ready, have space for whatever they need. That's what you have to set up before everything. You have to have your players know their characters and the situations your characters are in. That's a good one. They should be familiar with themselves. For whatever reason, if they're not familiar with something, they really should be. You should make sure that they have at least an understanding of whatever their characters do. If it's been like some time since you've played, have them refamiliarize themselves with their characters before you're worrying about going into the session. Because, if it's been a month, they might have forgotten some of their abilities. It happens if there's long periods of time in between sessions. Make sure someone makes notes, at least one of your players, because that's going to help for the overall group that at least someone's making notes about what's going on. You yourself are going to make notes. If you have to come up with an NPC, a location, something on the fly, make sure you remember it, because you do want some consistency to the world you have. Things don't just change all the time. There are points in times where you can excuse consistency problems, but, like changing of shifts at a store. But that store should have the same name. Now you move into actually playing the session. You describe the initial scene that your players are in, whether it's a new scene from a new adventure, or it's continuing a scene from a previous session you had, or it's kind of setting up the next scene after where your players left off. Whatever it is, you're going to describe this initial scene of the adventure and try to figure out how the players are reacting to what's going on and getting into the game. And after that, you run through all the encounters you sort of planned out for the adventure, or at least for the session in this adventure. You run through everything you were planning for the day. Maybe you don't get through all of them, depending on if you have a cutoff time. You're only playing for X amount of time. Or maybe you go through all of them and end the adventure. You don't know. It's going to depend on your players and what's going on. Make sure to take breaks when appropriate. That's the big thing, too. People might need to go to the bathroom, get a snack, get a drink, something like that. Be ready for that. Finally, you end the session. Now, this could be the end of the adventure, of course, or it couldn't be. This is where you sort of put everything on the down low. This is important to talk about, because we did talk about the end of the session before, but there's more to it than just where you end that session. Talk about it for a little bit. talk about how things went in the session. You're going to want to get information from your players, basically what they felt about the session, what was good, what was bad. You're going to gather information from this. You're going to have your players basically break down a little bit about the game, kind of understand what's going on a little bit more. Talking about with each other is going to have them basically process all this information that they heard, kind of learn about it, and also give you some hints about what you can do next time. This is also a point in time that you can ask what your players are going to do next. If you're at the end of an adventure, that's really important. It's like leading into the next adventure, what are your players planning on doing? Or if it's like towards this point in the session, what your players are planning for the next session. You can basically judge the encounters or whatever you want to do with your players for the next time based upon what they say here. This is also a point in time where you can award experience points. You can award it right here at the end of a session. This isn't the only time you can award it, of course. You could, if you really wanted to, do it at the beginning of the next session, do experience then. Or if you want to, and it's not the end of an adventure, you can actually award experience in between adventures. If you feel it's more appropriate that characters level in between adventures rather than the middle of them, it's entirely up to you how you do this. If you'd be awarding it now, you'd have to maybe worry about leveling up in the middle of adventure. It's fine if you account for that. But again, entirely your play style of how you want to award experience to your players. So that's it for today. I talked some more information about being a GM. I talked about cheating. I talked about kind of the appropriateness of cheating and when it is and when it isn't. It's a choice when to cheat. You're probably not going to want to, but you might. It's something that you're going to have to think about. You have to think of when it's really appropriate to do it and when it's not, and figure it out for you, what's best for you. Again, this is only talking about it. It's going to be up to you as the game master when you think it's appropriate. I talked about ending your session. That's important. Now, this could be the end of the adventure. It could just be an end of a session. I just talked about the appropriate ways you should have ended a little bit. Just things you shouldn't do, and if you're trying to do some things, little tricks you could do. And I talked about an important checklist of what you're going to have for your sessions. Basically, from the setup in the real world, to what your characters and players should know, to what's going to happen in the game, just a little bit. A basic checklist of everything. Next time, I'm going to talk about building your own adventure, because now that we've sort of set up what you need to do as a game master, kind of what kind of story you're putting up, it's time to put together all that stuff and actually build your adventure. That's what we're diving into next time. But regardless, if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It's just for the channel, the Empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check my Patreon. Link in the description below. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.